Hello everyone and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the MLB DFS Core Pick video for today, Friday, June 14th. If you're joining me for the very first time, first of all, welcome in. Second of all, this is how today's video will be structured. We'll be going over a recap of yesterday's picks, seeing how they ultimately ended up turning out. And then after that, we'll get moved over to RotoWire, talk about the weather report, which is just going to be any game that does have a double-digit chance of rain for the main slate. After that, we'll get moved over to FanDuel, talk about my core picks. It's going to be one pitcher, four hitters. It's going to be based on a combination of past performance versus the respective opponent, as well as some recent history. And then after that, we'll get moved over to my cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. That cheat sheet is 100% free. It is up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely feel free to check it out as you're building out your lineups for tonight's slate. But without further ado, we'll get started with a recap of yesterday's picks. So we're going to start off at the pitcher position with Justin Steele. He was $8,800. Got to 37 points. He was hit. He was the 5th overall pitcher on yesterday's slate. Obviously, we'd like to see that win out of him, but unfortunately, the Cubs just can't get him a win for whatever reason this season. And then we're going to move down to first base with Christian Walker, $3,300. Got to 44.4 points. He was a monster hit on yesterday's slate. He was the top first baseman, the top hitter overall. Had a 2-home run game. A really good performance out of him. At shortstop, we went Francisco Lindor, $3,600. Only got to 15.2, but still was a hit. He was the 4th overall shortstop on yesterday's slate. And then his teammate Starlin Marte, $3,300, only got 9 points, so it did ultimately end up giving him a push. Wasn't really anybody that helped our lineups, wasn't anybody that really hurt it at the same time. And then last but not least, we had Lourdes Gurriel Jr., $3,300. Unfortunately, went 0 for 4 yesterday, and he had 0 points, so he was a mess. So a little bit of a mixed bag yesterday. If you had some other decent plays alongside this core, you had a good chance of at least doubling up yesterday. A little bit higher scoring day on the day overall. But some decent plays here. Obviously, once again, if you had some other decent ones alongside it, probably was a pretty decent day. If you didn't, probably not as great for you yesterday just in general. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to RotoWire and talk about that weather report for tonight's slate. So there's going to be 3 games in total that we'll be watching for weather. The first one's going to be in Baltimore with the Orioles and the Phillies. 47% chance of rain over there, so kind of a toss-up whether or not this one ultimately gets better or worse as the day moves along, though. But if anything does majorly change, we'll have that down in the comments. And then we move down to New York with the Mets and the Padres, 69% chance of rain there. So that is one that we're very, very much going to be monitoring, which kind of stinks because it looks like a pretty decent game to stack, especially from that Padres side. And then last but not least, we get down to Colorado with a 36% chance of rain for the Rockies and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And obviously out in Colorado, things can change kind of as the day moves along. They can change pretty quickly as well. So we'll keep an eye on that one. It does look like a pretty decent game to stack, obviously being out at Coors Field. So if you want to get some exposure there, makes some sense. But we'll just keep an eye out on the weather as the day moves along. And with that being said, as always, all the weather updates will be left down in the comments, whether it's for any of these 3 games or any other game that does change throughout the day. But without further ado, we'll get moved over to FanDuel and talk about my core picks for tonight's slate. So we're going to start off with the pitcher position. We got Freddie Peralta here. He's $9,800 going against the Cincinnati Reds, averaging about 34 fantasy points per game. So it's been a pretty good season for him so far. He's got some pretty decent history versus the Reds in the past. He pitched against them twice in 2023. He had 61 and 46 points. So if we can get anything close to that tonight, it's going to be a really good slate for him overall. And if you look at what he's done so far in the season, he's got 4 wins, an ERA just under 4 with the 3.95. That's kind of the one thing with Freddie Peralta. The ERA is a little bit higher than you would like, kind of out of a star pitcher, but do definitely like his upside, obviously. He'll have some hit or miss games in between there, coming off a rougher start against Detroit, but looking for him to bounce back in a pretty big way overall. And kind of the big thing for him is just getting that 6-inning mark and getting that quality start for us overall. Then we're going to move down to first base. We're going right back to Christian Walker today, $3,400, averaging over 11 fantasy points per game. Obviously been really hot as of late. Goes against the Chicago White Sox tonight is Chris Flexen on the mound. He's 3 for 4 with 1 home run versus Flexen in his career. And if you look at what Christian Walker has done as of late, he has at least 1 hit in 4 out of his last 5 games. 3 of those games have been multi-hit games. 3 home runs during that time span, 3 double-digit performances, and then the 4 games that he's had at least 1 hit, he's had at least 9 fantasy points in. So it looks like a pretty solid, safe option just in general, and then he does obviously have that high-end upside, which we saw as recently as last night. And on the season, he's up to a .258 batting average, 15 home runs, 46 RBIs, once again averaging just over 11 fantasy points per game at $3,400. Looks like a pretty reasonable value on tonight's slate overall. Then we're going to move down to third base with Manny Machado. He is $3,000. Not the greatest start to the year for him. He's averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He goes against New York Mets tonight. Is Sean Manaea on the mound. He's 7 for 17 for Sean Manaea in his career. And if you look at what Manny Machado's done as of late, 2 out of his last 3 games, he's had at least 1 hit in. Both those games were multi-hit games. No home runs during that time span, no double-digit performances. He's kind of been up and down so far this season. So we're kind of hoping for the good game out of him. Got some decent history over Sean Manaea there in the past. And if you look at what Manny Machado has done on the season in totality, a .252 batting average, 6 home runs, 32 RBIs, averaging just under 9 fantasy points per game at $3,000. So a pretty cheap price tag when you think of Manny Machado. But kind of if you think about what he's done so far this season, is probably in line with what he's done. And then we're going to move down to shortstop and Willy Adames. $3,200, averaging about 11.5 fantasy points per game on the season. Goes against the Cincinnati Reds. Hunter Green on the mound tonight. He is 3 for 12 with 2 home runs versus Hunter Green in his career. So a little bit of hit or miss history there, but when he does hit the ball versus Hunter Green, it typically ends up going over the fence. And he has at least 1 hit in 3 out of his last 4 games, 1 multi-hit game during that time span, 2 home runs, and 3 double-digit performances. So doing pretty well as of late. Obviously, Willy Adames is kind of one of those streaky hitters. And I will say this with him, too. If he doesn't hit tonight and you're playing MLB DFS tomorrow, just go ahead and play him tomorrow, because it seems like with Willy Adames, on paper, when he looks like a good play and he doesn't hit that day, usually he ends up hitting the next day. And if you look at what he's done on the season in totality, 246 average, 11 home runs, 47 RBIs, averaging just over 11.5 fantasy points per game at $3,200. So it's been a pretty solid season for him so far, and hopefully that continues once again tonight. Then last but not least, we got our paydown value option and Mitch Haniger in the outfield at $2,500. Only averaging about 7 fantasy points per game on the season. Not been the greatest season for him overall. However, tonight he's going against Andrew Heaney of the Texas Rangers. 8 for 25 with 3 home runs versus him in his career. Guy that typically does hit left-handed pitching pretty well. He has at least 1 hit in 11 of his last 14 games. That's kind of the good part. He has only 1 multi-hit game during that time span, 0 home runs, and only 2 double-digit performances. So the high-end upside doesn't appear to be there as of late. But if he can get a home run versus Andrew Heaney, who he's hit very well in the past, it's going to look like a pretty good performance for him overall. And that's really all we need out of him at $2,500. If we can get 9 points double-digit or higher out of him tonight, he's going to look like a really good play overall. But with that being said, if you go with these 5 players that I do currently have listed here, you have $13,100 remaining. Just under $3,300 per player. So there's a pretty good amount of money left over, whether you want to go balance build the rest away from here, or whether or not you want to pay up for a couple star players at some positions and then pay down at some other spots. Definitely a lot of ways that we can approach tonight's slate overall. But with that being said, we'll get moved over to cheat sheet and talk about my top GPP teams to stack for tonight's slate overall. So once again, the cheat sheet is 100% free. It's posted up on the Sports Affiliation website, so definitely be sure to check it out as you're building out your lineups for tonight's slate overall. But in terms of the teams that I do have to stack for tonight's games, we got the San Diego Padres. They got some pretty good history over Sean Manaea in the past. And the only guy in my sheet here that doesn't really have that history is Fernando Tatis Jr., but he's been hitting the ball pretty well as of late, so I'm definitely willing to take that upside if I'm building out a Padres stack tonight. And then next up, we have the Blue Jays going against Logan Allen, who's been very hit or miss so far this season. Blue Jays have hit him pretty well in the past, although it is a very, very small sample size. Davis Snyder's 2 for 2 with 1 home run versus him. George Springer's got a home run off him, and then Bo Bichette also has a hit. So if you want to go to that Blue Jays team, it does make some sense tonight. They're starting to hit the ball just a little bit better in general. Then we move over there as on Diamondbacks going against Chris Flexen. Flexen's pitched a little bit better as of late, but this Diamondbacks team has hit him really well in the past, whether that is Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and then a couple other guys that have a few at-bats here and there versus him. And then last but not least, we have the Pirates going against Ryan Feltner. There's not a long list of history there, but a lot of these guys have hit him really well in the past, plus this game's at Coors Field if it ultimately does end up going off. But with that being said, that's what I do have in terms of the recap, the weather report, the core picks, and the top GPP stacks for tonight's slate overall. As always, if you have any questions related to MLB DFS, be sure to drop them down in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. And then with that being said, I'll be posting all the updates as they do come out throughout the day, whether that is weather, starting pitcher related, since we've had a few guys scratched here and there in recent days, as well as the starting lineups as they do get announced throughout the afternoon and early evening. So definitely be sure you're checking up on that as we do get closer to lock. But with that being said, if you are brand new to my channel, checking out for the very first time, or have yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your DFS. Right now, we have MLB DFS in terms of the core picks Monday through Friday. And then I do have my CFL DFS video coming out once a week, typically on Wednesdays. And then my final UFL DFS video for the championship game, the single game slate, will be coming out later today. So definitely be sure to check out those videos as well if that's something you're into. And then last but not least, if you're interested in sports betting, if you're interested in prop betting whatsoever, be sure to check out the links and promo codes down in the description below for Prize Picks, Parlay Play, and BetUS. If you are a brand new user on any one of those three sites, when you sign up, make your initial deposit, you will get a first match deposit bonus. For Prize Picks and Parlay Play, it's 100% match up to $100. And then for BetUS, it's 125% match up to $2,500. So some pretty good opportunities to be had out there. And then with that being said, if you have any other additional questions related to that whatsoever, feel free to reach out to me, whether it's down in the comments or on Twitter at Coach Craig Sport, and be more than happy to help you with that journey as well. But with that being said, that's all that I truly have for today's video. Definitely do appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. Definitely means a lot to me. I hope that each and every one of you have a great rest of your day and some pretty good luck in MLB DFS tonight.